Hello my YouTube friends, it's Trevor here coming at you from the Tesla on FSD mode, and I want to actually discuss today how MSTR gets to a $10,000 share price, right? This is a big deal, right? $10,000 when it's only, around 230, 240, 250 as of today's posting of this video. Before I get into it, make sure to definitely subscribe to the channel. If you're interested in MSTR, crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, any sort of AI like Tesla or NVIDIA or CoreWeave or anything like that, or robotics, emerging markets, that kind of a thing. We talk about that every single day on this channel. Let's get right into it. So basically, a $10,000 stock price is, you can just kind of idealize it, round up, make it like a 40x. 40x. So it's not 4x, not a 14, 4D, 4T with a T. Forty, right? 40x. Okay? So look at it this way. Here's how I look at it. If Bitcoin is $100,000 right now and MSTR is 250, you could essentially also multiply Bitcoin by 40x, right? And that would keep you at at like an MNAV similar to what it is now for MicroStrategy, which is like a pretty low. It's like 1.1, 1.2, 1.25, something like that. So with that being said, you could if you did that math, it would be $4 million for Bitcoin, and MSTR would be worth $10,000 per share, right? So $4 million Bitcoin price. When do I think, personally, as a humble guy on YouTube, giving you my opinion while I'm driving in my car, I would say that a $4 million Bitcoin price is definitely possible by like 2035. That's my prediction, and I could be wrong, but we're talking about in 1 decade, in 10 years from today. This is a long-term investing channel, guys. So I might make like a few short-term price predictions for assets, every once in a while, but for the most part, this is my channel focused on long-term investing, and that's also what I focus on doing, is long-term investing. Being in a better place 10 years from now than what we are today. Now, that being said, what I just gave to you is basically the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is actually if Bitcoin goes to like 10K for like a year or two, and MicroStrategy has to start selling off its Bitcoin, right? If that doesn't happen, then the next worst case is if Bitcoin just doesn't move at all, right? If it doesn't go up. But in the case that Bitcoin does go up, and in the case that Bitcoin does go up to 1 million by 2030 and 5 million by 2035, 10 million by 2040, something like that, right? And these numbers could be completely off. This is just like me rambling in my car to you guys. So definitely let me know what your guys' price predictions are for Bitcoin and MSTR down below for the 2030s, right? For the long term. But this is just me speculating, right? Essentially, let's say it's 2035. Bitcoin is $4 million per coin. And MicroStrategy at an MNAV of what it is now, like let's just call it 1.15, right? Then MicroStrategy would be about $10,000 per share, right? So in 10 years. Now, that is a worst case scenario for the MNAV, in my personal humble opinion, right? In times like these, where MicroStrategy has had like a minus 30% move in like the past like 2 weeks, right? Number one, that should set off alarms with everyone that this is probably an oversold stock, right? Where it's like, okay, you just had a lot more money in the stock than you do now. Not that much has changed with Bitcoin, right? The Bitcoin price is like 105, So Bitcoin is like 19% off of its highs, while MicroStrategy is like 50%, right? But that just goes to show you like the leveraged play you're making with MicroStrategy, right? So in the bear, like quote unquote bear market that MicroStrategy is in right now, which I wouldn't consider it like a bear market. I would just consider it like a correction. Like, we're down a little bit, but like, look at what Bitcoin's probably going to do in the next year or two, right? So like, I dismiss the term bear market when you bring up MicroStrategy. I just don't see it right now. I'm sure it will eventually happen again where MicroStrategy is in a bear market. I just don't think that's the case right now in November of 2025. I think it is a generational buying opportunity. That is what I think. But anyway, so like right now, when you've had a 30% decline in the stock price, yeah, like no, everyone's, talking massive crap on the company, and there's FUD everywhere. I saw an article today that said the executive vice president of the company just sold like $1.25 million worth of shares. And it's like, to like a beginner investor that doesn't know anything, it's like, oh my gosh, that rich guy that runs the company just sold over $1 million in stock today. There's a bunch of insider trading. I don't need to have any part of this stock. But then when you get to it further and you realize the dude's got over $90 million of MicroStrategy stock, and he sold off essentially 2%, 1.5% of his holdings, then it kind of puts things more into picture. As well as when you look at his entire net worth compared to the amount of shares he owns in the company, it's like 90+% of his net worth is in MicroStrategy shares. Okay, so just one example of the FUD that's circulating, right? When this FUD does circulate, when you have a stock that's gone down so much, and influential people, like I said in the previous video, Jason Calacanis coming out on X and talking crap on MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor, right? It's like, yeah, people tend to jump on board, and they all kind of, I would say right now there's blood in the streets for MicroStrategy. Like earlier this year when people were destroying Teslas on the street, and vandalizing them, and trying to burn Tesla service centers to the ground, that was the time to be buying Tesla stock, right? And right now, when there's so much negative media, negative press, and negative sentiment about Bitcoin, but negative media about MSTR, it's like, this is actually probably the time to be buying some shares. I'm not a financial advisor, but I am a humble guy on YouTube that'll give you my opinion. Yeah, so when all this FUD circulates, a lot of the upside about this stock kind of just like gets washed away in the wind, But when you think about how MicroStrategy is probably going to end up in the S&P 500, I've talked about this in previous videos. I haven't brought it up recently, but I need to retell you guys this stuff again, because it's going to happen. When it happens, I can't tell you. I imagine it'll happen within the next year. I think it'll probably happen within the next 6 months, but I don't know, right? I think it is closer than most investors would think that it is, as far as them getting inducted into the S&P 500. And once that happens, do you guys think we're going to still have MNAVs at like 1, 1.1, 1.2 when it's in the S&P 500? You guys can go take a look at Coinbase stock, right? Ticker COIN, right? When that thing IPO'd, it was expensive. And then it went down like 80, 90%, right? And I bought some Coinbase down at the lows, right? I bought some more Coinbase after Liberation Day, the day that in April when Trump came out and announced all the tariffs, because Coinbase went down a lot. And I've since gotten out of my Coinbase position, but I made a lot of money. And while I own Coinbase after Liberation Day, they got, approved to be put into the S&P 500. And what do you know? It's like a 10, 15% move up in the stock price, right? Where it's like right now, crypto is such a large industry. Here's the big bullish thesis for why MicroStrategy will be put into the S&P 500, right? There are a few companies in the S&P 500 right now that have treasuries with Bitcoin in them that they're not touching, such as Coinbase, right? Also Tesla. So there are a few companies that already hold Bitcoin, but there's no companies like MicroStrategy that hold as much Bitcoin as them. And the fact of the matter is that crypto is a multi-trillion-dollar industry at this point. Just Bitcoin itself is worth $2.5 trillion, right? That's not even including Ethereum, XRP, Solana, anything else, right? So you're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar industry that has a lot of underexposure in the S&P 500, if you ask me. And the more people that grow up from the younger generations that turn 18, most of the time it takes most people until like mid-20s to get interested in investing, but maybe that, starts earlier, like when people turn 22, 20, 18, you know, that regardless, I think 18 to 25 is when people generally that start really like investing. That's when they get into it. And so it's like every year you get more people interested in investing. And what are the odds that these people that are younger aren't going to want to invest in something digital, like a Bitcoin or, you know, some sort of AI or robotics or some sort of like new innovative, you know, something cool, right? Something that's new but has a lot of value to it, right? So what I'm saying is, like, the younger generation isn't going to go out and buy gold. They're just not going to do it, especially with how expensive gold is compared to Bitcoin right now, right? It's kind of like the Netflix or the Fubo play, right? Where it's like you got all these boomers that they still use DirecTV or Cox or whatever for their TV service, right? But as these boomers pass away because they've gotten older, every year that happens, and every year, you know, an 18-year-old has to go to college, has to go to college and get their own streaming services. It's the exact same premise where it's like, this is the new age, right? Where all these new 18-year-olds that are getting the Netflix, they're also probably, you know, there's a good chance they get into some Bitcoin, right? And maybe even some MSTR. But what I'm getting at is this is a growing industry. This is not a dying industry. This is not the DirecTV of investing, right? This is the Fubo or the Netflix or the Hulu, right? So yeah, it's just it's interesting to think about it like that. That it's one of the ways that I definitely convinced myself anyway that Bitcoin is going to continue to explode. Also, the population of the world is going to continue to increase as long as birth rates don't continue to decrease, right? In certain areas, as long as the population increases, then the Bitcoin per capita or Bitcoin per person, that ratio will continue to decrease, right? So it'll increase its scarcity because there's only a certain amount. Anyway, like I've said in previous videos, all Bitcoin news is MSTR news. So, which is crazy. So that's my whole point is, like, even in times like today, you can see how, like, MSTR could get to $10,000 per share. With Bitcoin even only at like 1 million or 2 million, right? Because like I said, 4 million is the worst case scenario. That's like if the MNAV is still a 1.15, let's just say, right? In 10 years or 8 years, however long it takes to get to $4 million per Bitcoin. Okay. But like, that's assuming they don't, you know, accumulate any more Bitcoin. So they only have their 642,000 Bitcoin. That's it, right? That's also assuming they don't put any more preferred stocks out to accumulate any more Bitcoin. That's also assuming they don't get into the S&P 500. That's assuming a lot of negative factors, right? And when you start actually looking at the macro scale of everything and looking at a long-term time horizon, it's like, what is the appropriate MNAV for the leading Bitcoin treasury company in the world that continues to get money from investors and given to them? They buy Bitcoin, Bitcoin goes up, they can now increase the amount of Bitcoin they can get from investors. They go buy more Bitcoin, Bitcoin goes up. They can now get more money from investors, you know, because they're so heavily over collateralized every time that Bitcoin goes up, right? Because that increases their amount of collateral every time. So if Bitcoin doubles today, they are now twice as collateralized on their loans and on their preferred stocks as they were before, right? So it's like, the more Bitcoin goes up, the more money they can raise, and so they can buy more Bitcoin. So it seems like complex and maybe a little bit circular, but when you get into the nitty-gritty of it, you look at the past performance, you look at the future, prospects for the company and what everything that could happen and probably would happen, and if you put a percentage chance that, like, let's say percentage chance they get into the S&P 500, I would put that at like a 96%. Like, they are already a gigantic company. They're worth almost $100 billion market cap, right? And yeah, so there's a lot of bullish catalysts, and I'm not even talking probably 90% of the bullish catalysts that are coming up in the future, right? These are just a few. So that's why I personally think that, like, you're looking at long-term an MNAV of like 2, maybe even 3, maybe even higher than that. I don't know. I don't want to get too bullish, too crazy on it. But, like, at the same time, like, why would it trade at an MNAV of 1.15 forever? I don't see that happening. So, all right, guys, let me know what you guys think about that in the comment section below. How long do you guys think it'll take for MSTR to get to 10,000? and for Bitcoin to get to 1 million, Bitcoin to get to 5 million. Give me all your comments below. Let me know what you think. If you made it this far, 15 minutes in exactly, definitely subscribe to the channel. What are you doing? We talk about this stuff all the time. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video and have a great, fantastic day.